I'm just going to give a quick overview quickly of some of the issues we're facing at a global level with regard to invasive alien species management and what CABI is trying to do. We've just started a whole big initiative to raise the profile of invasive alien species at a global level. So we've got to influence donors and governments. And I'm sure we've all seen this figure before of $1.4 trillion per annum. And it's a gross underestimate, and it's a figure that was, we got to know in about 2001. It's probably significantly more than this. By the time this figure came out, it was double Africa's GDP, so it's quite a significant amount of money. So this work we've done it globally and from literature, etc., found out that invasive alien species actually can reduce crop yields by more than 90%. And in cases where there's absolutely no management, obviously you can't have any yields, especially in case of rice and other crops. Invasive alien species obviously also have an impact on carrying capacities for livestock, and this is a real issue for us, especially in East, Southern, and the Horn of Africa. Invasive alien species obviously also impact on human and animal health, and we've had some presentations yesterday with regard to whitetop, and some of these nice gruesome pictures here about injuries sustained as a result of coming into contact with lionfish. And we often forget that HIV/AIDS is probably is also an invasive alien species and has had a massive impact at a global level. In Africa, we're also faced with a situation where invasive alien plants are contributing to the abandonment of homes and villages, and is also driving conflict, as the natural resource base is being eroded as a result of invasive alien species. It's driving more and more people into conflict. And then we all know that invasive alien species probably pose the biggest threat to biodiversity after habitat destruction. So, invasive alien species probably pose one of the biggest threats to economic development at a global level. And I've always found it interesting that climate change is right up there, but invasive alien species aren't. And we need to change that perception. So can we make a difference? And the answer is, of course we can. But how? We need to strengthen and implement policy and legislation, and this is really critical, okay? We need to create awareness. I think most people, a lot of governments, a lot of policymakers are not aware of the impacts of invasive alien species, and we need to make them aware. We need to build capacity, because without knowledge you cannot create awareness. Without knowledge you cannot influence policymakers. So it's very important to build capacity so we can get a better understanding of the impacts of invasive alien species. And that's why yesterday was really good in terms of demonstrating the costs and benefits of invasive alien species management. And we need to develop and implement best management practices. And the crucial thing is we need to ensure that governments provide long-term support for IAS management. We're not going to be able to manage invasive alien species if we're just dependent on donor funds. We really need to get long-term sustainable support from governments. Otherwise, we're not going to get on top of the problem. So the current project, which is now coming to an end, unfortunately, but it's laid the foundations where the governments can actually work on. This is what the idea about the project was. Okay? The project is not going to provide all the solutions, but it's developed some really good foundations for country governments to build on. And CABI, a lot of the member states, countries that were part of this project are actually members of CABI itself. So we're going to continue to providing you support by providing you up-to-date information on invasive alien species. The intention with CABI is to develop this invasive alien species information hub. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with the Invasive Species Compendium, which is being updated all the time. We have a large amount of fact sheets, over 1,500, and in the last year we've had about 250,000 visits to our website. We want to expand on this website, we want to make it more interactive, and we want to make it more useful. And we want to include sort of a system to do pest risk assessments, etc., like the previous crop protection compendium from CABI had. And we also want to raise the profile of invasive alien species, obviously at a global level, But we want to draw on the links between invasive alien species and development and livelihoods, for example. In developing countries, invasive alien species really have a dramatic impact on people's lives. And we want to really highlight that issue. I think it's an issue that is not being addressed at all. And we also want to draw on the links between invasive alien species and flagship species. And we think by this two-pronged sort of awareness campaign, we might be able to raise the profile of invasive species and get governments and donors to sit up and take notice. And one thing we want to do is we want to develop and implement best management practices for invasive alien species, focusing particularly on IPM and classical biological control. So IPM, integrated pest management, and classical biological control. And you might ask yourselves, why? Why are we focusing on this? One of the key issues we're facing worldwide is the use of pesticides. And already we're using more than 3 million metric tons of pesticides applied each year. And as a result of that, obviously, there's a lot of non-target impacts and a lot of impacts on people using the chemicals themselves and obviously eating contaminated products. Then we also have to deal with the issue of pesticide resistance. About 520 insect and mite species, nearly 150 plant pathogens, and about 273 weed species are now resistant to pesticides. So how do we deal with this? It's basically only through IPM or CBC. And then we also want to facilitate trade. And most of goods exported, most of the fruit and vegetables exported globally are now being rejected as a result of pesticide residues. So if we want to improve trade, we want to improve countries' income, we really have to look at reducing pesticide use in crop production systems. And yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about cost-benefit analysis. And the cost and benefit ratios for classical biocontrol are really big. For every $1 invested on average, the returns are $250. So it really is a good investment. In terms of augmentative control, CBAs are similar to those for use of insecticides. So it really is the way to go, the way of the future. So CABI's goal with regard to invasive alien species management is to reduce the impacts of invasive alien species on the livelihoods of at least 50 million of the world's poorest people and saving more than $1 billion in current and future costs to these countries. And I think it can be achieved. For example, CABI, working together with the IITA, introduced a biocontrol agent for the control of cassava mealybug in Africa. The project cost $27 million, and the net returns on that investment were $4.5 billion. Okay, so we can really make a huge difference in people's lives by enhancing management of invasive alien species. But the key is we can only do this in working partnership. We cannot work in isolation. And this is also really important in the region here. It's pointless if Jamaica just controls lionfish and no one else does. Okay, so it's really, really critical that we all start working together. We all start working together in raising the profile of invasive alien species. Okay, it's a neglected issue. And unless we raise the profile, we're going to struggle to convince governments and donors. Okay. Thank you very much.